In the vast realm of video game consoles, there stands an iconic monolith, a console that has left an undeniable mark on the gaming world and continues to be celebrated by fans even to this day. This of course would be the legendary Commodore 60. Nah, I'm just kidding with you. It's the Nintendo 64.
Well, I never!
Yeah, I know I'm terrible, but I will look at the Commodore 64 Mini in the future. But anyway, for us to fully appreciate as well as understand the Nintendo 64, we have to take a trip back to the past. In the early 90s, a time where the gaming industry was entering a new era, Nintendo sought to revolutionise gaming once again, like they had done in the early 80s, with the highly popular NES.
Now you're playing with power.
Following on from this grey box of fun was the 16-bit powerhouse known as the Super Nintendo.
Now you're playing with power, superpower.
Thanks to the outstanding success of the Super Nintendo, it was inevitable that a successor would be announced, and this came in the form of the Nintendo 64. Nintendo began working on the N64 in the mid-90s. It found itself in the midst of a fierce rivalry with other gaming giants. Now Sega had already released the Sega Saturn, while Sony were gearing up for the launch of the PlayStation.
Nice.
With the Sega Saturn being released earlier than anticipated, it caught both consumers and developers off guard. But it was the Sony PlayStation that posed a more significant threat, especially with it embracing the CD-ROM format. And with titles like Resident Evil, Final Fantasy VII, and even Crash Bandicoot, the PlayStation quickly gained popularity, setting a new challenge for Nintendo. These are just some of the games available for the Sony PlayStation, and maybe I'll do a top 20 in the future, but anyway, it was in 1996 that the world was introduced to the legendary Nintendo 64. The N64 launched with a small but impressive lineup of games, but one of the most striking features of the N64 was its groundbreaking controller, which defied convention and set new standards for gaming. And the most iconic feature of the Nintendo 64 controller was its central analog stick, which allowed for precise movements in a 3D environment. And of course you can't forget the all-important Z button on the back.
Pew, pew. Gotcha.
The N64 was gaining popularity, fast becoming a cult classic. But it wasn't just a games console, it was an unforgettable experience, especially when it came to the games. The Nintendo 64 boasted a library of games that defined a generation, and when discussing iconic N64 titles, it's impossible to ignore the game that set the gold standard for 3D platformers.
Hello!
This obviously would be Super Mario 64, which was not only a technical marvel, but also a groundbreaking adventure that allowed players to explore Princess Peach's castle and its various worlds. But when it came to multiplayer gaming, GoldenEye was the cream of the crop, and showcasing that the first-person shooter genre can thrive on a console. And when it comes to GoldenEye, there's an unwritten rule, especially when it comes to multiplayer, and this would be not to use Oddjob.
Oh, that really hurt. Who throws a shoe? Honestly.
And obviously, you can't mention multiplayer gaming without talking about Mario Kart 64. And with memorable tracks such as Rainbow Road, as well as frantic multiplayer races, Mario Kart 64 became a staple of N64 gaming nights. And if you managed to get your hands on a blue leader shell, you could change the outcome of any race, even if your methods were, shall we say, evil. Now there is another legendary title that certainly has left a mark on the N64, and of course this would be The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. This epic adventure transported players to the world of Hyrule, where they would traverse the flow of time in order to stop the evil Ganondorf. And when it came to the sequel Majora's Mask, it was equally as impressive. Definitely one gaming series I will come back to, but when I get to a special milestone. The Nintendo 64 also boasted other iconic titles, as well as having a treasure trove of hidden gems that sometimes get often overlooked. While it may not have received the same level of attention as GoldenEye, Perfect Dark was a hidden gem that pushed the boundaries of what the N64 was capable of. Perfect Dark was pretty sweet, and in my opinion, it can stand shoulder to shoulder with GoldenEye. Obviously, which one is better? But anyway, what other hidden gems did the Nintendo 64 have? Mystical Ninja starring Goemon was an enchanting action-adventure game that combined Japanese folklore with quirky humour and traditional gameplay. But if gamers were looking for a more puzzle-based game that provided a perfect challenge, then Blast Corps was right up their street.
Excellent!
In Blast Corps, players had to clear a path for a runaway nuclear missile carrier. One false move, and it's... The Nintendo 64's gaming library was impressive, and it showed that there was a title for everybody. Whether you're a veteran gamer or a newcomer to this amazing console, it's easy to see why the Nintendo 64 is still regarded as a true classic.
Shut up and take my money!
Anyway, come back next time where the cartoon guy looks towards New Texas for a wild adventure. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next game.